everybody, it's Emily at Arg Schooling, and today I wanted to share with you some fall reading recommendations. So it is the second day of fall. I wanted to film this yesterday on the first day of fall, but it just did not work out. So it's the second day. We're still good. It's still fall. So I wanted to give you guys some recommendations for things that you can read this season. And I've divided this up into categories. So I'm hoping there is something here for everybody. So the first category I wanted to do recommendations for is cozy historical, because I feel like this is like the time of year that I crave historical fiction the most. So I wanted to give a couple different recommendations for that. So for cozy historical fiction, I want to recommend two books by Jennifer Ryan. These are the only books I've read by this author, but I feel like they're pretty indicative of her whole backlist, so anything by her would be great, but these are the two that I've read. The first is The Kitchen Front, which I have recommended in the past. This is a book set during World War II. They both are. And in this book, we're following a group of women in England who have entered a cooking contest. And the idea behind this contest is women using the rations to make interesting meals so that it didn't feel like they were not having the things that they're used to having, you know? And so you have all these women from different backgrounds working on this, but they sort of start coming together and building this connection and friendship. And it's just a really cozy book. And it includes recipes. So it's cooking and it's all just really, really well done, and I just found this book super engaging. The second one is called The Underground Library. This is her new release this year, and this is also set during World War II in England. And in this book, we're following several women who work at the town library in London, and it's set during the Blitz. It's all about how they were able to bring the library into the underground subway system, because that's where a lot of the people in London were taking shelter during the bomb raids. They would go into the underground and camp there, basically. So these women were bringing books from the library to help soothe and entertain people while they were trapped underground, just waiting until they had the all clear to go back home. So again, really cozy. It's about people who love books and finding comfort in books and building friendship around the love of books. So I think if you are a bookish person, you would probably enjoy this. And then the last book for cozy historical that I want to recommend is Maria, a novel of Maria von Trapp by Michelle Moran. I read this earlier this summer and really, really enjoyed it. If you are a fan of The Sound of Music, which again I feel like is something that I crave watching this time of year. I know a lot of people watch it for Christmas, but I've always felt it was a fall movie. But if you enjoy The Sound of Music, I think you would like this book. This is about the making of the musical The Sound of Music and how Maria von Trapp felt about it, and her trying to get in touch with and speak to the creators of the musical to get them to create it right, because she felt like they were doing things wrong. It didn't make sense to her why they would change her story in any possible way. You have to do it exactly as it happened. And so she had some disagreements with the making of the musical. And so it's her being interviewed by one of Rodgers and Hammerstein's secretaries, and her telling her story accurately for the sake of fixing the musical. So you're getting her story, but you're also getting the story of how the musical came into being. And it's just a really good story. I found myself really engaged the whole time. It made me really want to watch Sound of Music again. So I think if you want a cozy historical book, if you love musicals, if you love The Sound of Music, you're going to love this book. Okay, so still on the historical theme, the next category is going to be creepy and weird historical. So these aren't all necessarily scary. Actually, I don't think any of them are scary, but they are weirder and a little bit darker in tone. So they have that like gothic ambiance that you might be looking for this time of year. So the first one, I think you can guess where my recommendations are going here, but Babel by R.F. Kuang is one of my all-time favorite books. This book is so good, and it is such a great fall read. This is a historical fantasy set in the early mid 1800s, I think it's like 1830s, 1840s, and it's set in Victorian England, and we're following a group of characters who have come from different backgrounds, different parts of the world, to study at Oxford, where they have this expertise with translation, because they are working on the magic of what has built this whole system of the British Empire. They have this weird, intricate magic system that involves translation, which is fascinating. So if you are a person who loves words, this is going to be interesting for you. And it's also all about colonization and how the British Empire has been taking and taking and taking from other cultures and countries to build up their own empire and the ramifications of that. So this book is big, but it's not a slow read. I felt like I flew through this. It's got so much to say, and it's such an interesting story. I really loved the magic system. I love how dark it is. If you like dark academia, this is fantastic. The characters are all really richly developed and interesting people on their own, and when they come together in this story, it's just so good. It's so good. You should read this. Next, I want to recommend Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This is excellent Gothic historical. It's so good. This is a story about a girl named Hazel who wants to become a surgeon, which is not something that is commonly done in the 1800s in Edinburgh. So she dresses up in her brother's clothes and sneaks into university so she can go to medical school there and take classes. And she is obsessed with becoming a surgeon. And so this story is full of like grave robbers and digging up corpses to sell on the black market to doctors who are trying to like study the human body, but also maybe doing it for nefarious purposes. And there's something going on with some weird experimentation, and so you're uncovering this mystery while you're also with her in the graveyard at night. And there's a budding romance, and it has everything. So if you like Gothic historical, you're going to enjoy Anatomy, a Love Story. Then I also want to recommend Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, which still stands today as my absolute favorite thriller I have ever read. I don't know if anything will ever top this. If you like twisty-turny thrillers that you can never figure out quite where the story's going, you're going to love this. This is set again in Victorian England. Do you sense a theme? I sense a theme. But if you like Victorian England, Sarah Waters. So this story follows a girl who is a maid who is roped into this whole, like, we're going to steal a fortune from this innocent woman who will never see it coming. That's the basis of the story. And I can't really tell you more from there because it gets so wacky so fast. Like, you don't know what's going to happen next. There's so many different twists and turns in this book. I literally gasped like 10 times. At one point, I like set my Kindle down because I was reading the ebook, turned to my husband in bed at night and was like, I have to tell you what's happening right now, because it had just completely blown my mind. Like, I did not expect anything that happened in this book. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, this is fantastic. Somebody tell me something else I should read, because I've tried so many thrillers and nothing is as good as this. Okay, so the next category I want to give recommendations for is light supernatural. So now we're veering into the really weird, but still not really scary. So if you want to try something that's a little bit horror or a little bit creepy, this category is for you. starting with Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. This is a story about a house on chicken legs, and it's about two siblings who have inherited this house and what they decide to do with it. So we're following this brother-sister duo who already live like really strange lives. They decide when they get this house that they're going to turn it into a puppet theater, and then they take it on the road. But there's also somebody who's coming after the house. So you're following these siblings on this adventure while there's also this entity coming after them. But you're also getting the perspective of the house itself, telling its story slowly over the course of the book. This is filled with Jewish, Eastern European mythology. This is about the idea of bearing witness and like being willing to see the tragedy as it's unfolding, but also like the memory of the tragedy. It's such a good story. I could not put it down. This was like my favorite book I read last year, and I still think more people should read it. I want to recommend Woman Eating by Claire Coda. I just read this like a few weeks ago, and I think it's a really great like baby step into the horror category. If you're a person who wants to try horror, but you're also a scaredy cat, if you're not sure you really want to go there, this is a great like baby step into horror, because it is about a vampire, but it's never scary. Like there's nothing happening in this book. It's not a plot heavy story. It's really more like, what's it like to be this girl? Let's follow her around as she lives her life. So it starts out with her moving into this new apartment, starting a new job, and just exploring this idea of her being a vampire and her relationship with her mother, who is also a vampire, and like how it has affected her life and how it makes her different and sets her apart. And she really wants to be human and experience humanity and eat food, but she can't. She's never going to be able to do that. And so she's obsessed with like watching videos on YouTube of people eating and like those what I eat in a day kinds of videos and things like that, to experience it through that. But also like finding out more about herself as a vampire and like what it really means, because her mother's never fully explained it to her. So I just think this was a really interesting story. I think, again, like if you want something that's a little bit more in getting into like the supernatural and disturbing and weird without actually being scary, I think this is for you. And this is probably the scariest of the three books. I tried to go in order. So like the first one, Thistlefoot's not scary at all. Woman Eating has some creepier elements to it, but this one's probably the scariest of the bunch while still not really being scary. This is Such Sharp Teeth, a werewolf novel by Rachel Harrison. I've described this book before as being like Hallmark horror, where it feels like a cozy Hallmark movie with horror elements included. So we're following this woman who is coming home for the first time in a long time because her twin sister is pregnant and needs her help. So she moves back home to spend time with her sister and comes back home to the small town she grew up in. And so it's a lot of like her meeting back up with old friends, maybe an old flame that she wants to see where things go with. But at the same time, she ends up getting bit by a werewolf, like shortly after coming home. And so she's doing all of the things like helping out her sister, dealing with old friends, reuniting with them, reuniting with her ex-boyfriend, and also her dealing with her mother and all of that stuff. But she's also dealing with like, oh God, now I'm also a werewolf. What am I supposed to do with this? So I just think it's a really fun read. It was really, really good. Like I did not expect to love this as much as I did because I've never really liked werewolf stuff before. So this was actually excellent, and I cannot wait to read more by Rachel Harrison in the future. Okay, so for the next category, now we're going to go into the scarier horror. So these are books that I think are more leaning into really scary horror. The first one is Lone Women by Victor Laval. This is a story about a woman trying to escape her past. So We start out at the very beginning of the book with her and this giant heavy trunk that she's dragging behind her, leaving her burning home and getting on a wagon and heading out west because she has heard that anybody, even a black woman, on her own can go to Montana and claim some land. And so that's her goal. She wants to get out. She wants to go west, go to Montana, get some land, and make her way in the world on her own and get away from the thing that's been like holding her back all this time, except she's bringing that thing with her. What is it? What's in the trunk? And how will that affect her going forward? That's what this book is about. And you're following her story, but you're also meeting some really interesting people in Montana that she runs into there and like their stories. And you will find out what's in the trunk and how it's affecting her life. This book is very cinematic. It's so easy to picture everything that's happening. And I thought the story was really well done, really interesting. I love reading about like people homesteading, but this is not much about homesteading. So if you're going into it like, ooh, I like reading about homesteading, no, there's not really much of that in here, but it is interesting to read about the different people and personalities and like how everything kind of comes together over the course of the story. So like if you really want something that's a little bit darker in tone while still being a little bit historical, while still being not super scary, I think you would like this. Next, I want to recommend You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Bayron. This is a slasher and it's set at a summer camp, like at the very end of the summer. So like just as they're starting to close down, they've like seen out the last of the campers and they're closing up this week and they should be able to go home, except things don't go as planned. People start disappearing. And so this story is set in this camp where it's not like a regular summer camp. It's like a horror movie experience camp where you can go book a stay for a weekend or a week or whatever and live out a slasher. So they have all these like booby traps and things all over the camp where it's meant to look like something from a slasher movie has happened, and you're paying for the chance to be offed or be the final girl or whatever in the story. And so that's the camp setup. So it's already a little bit on the creepy side and the weird side, but then also like, what's going on here? Why are the camp counselors who are closing up camp suddenly disappearing? Is somebody actually killing them? What's going on? So that is the setup here, and it has some twists and turns that I did not see coming, and I thought this was super well done. If you like slashers, I think you'll like this a lot. And for my last horror recommendation, I want to share Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I read this earlier this year and absolutely loved it. This is such a different, interesting type of horror novel. We're following this couple who have had a very traumatic several months. The wife has given birth to their first child and had a freak accident during the birth that has paralyzed her. So not only is she dealing with the postpartum depression and all of that, but she's also dealing with becoming recently disabled and how that is affecting her ability to care for her child, her ability to just be a part of this marriage. So they entered a lottery to live in this upscale, fancy apartment complex in the city. It's like a historical building, and they offer apartments for less wealthy patrons, let's say, for like a really good deal. And so they win the lottery to go and get an apartment here. And as they're touring the apartment, they notice some things. There's a lot of red flags. Maybe this isn't the right place, but it's too good to be true, so they decide to take it. And it is absolutely too good to be true. Like, there is something weird going on here, and I don't really want to tell you too much about it because I feel like the less you know going into this, the better the twists and the turns will be. So just know that this is a lot gorier than the other two books that I recommended. This is probably the scariest and the goriest of the books that I've recommended to you today. So if you want to go there, if you want to read something that's dark and creepy and weird and gross, I highly recommend this. So my last category is going to be middle grade. Because how can I not recommend something for middle grade readers, but this could also be for you if you want something a little lighter. These are all books that I think are universal, like everybody would enjoy them, but if you have kids and they're looking for something to read for the fall season that will get them really into this, like, the fall vibes, these 3 books will be great. So the first one I want to recommend is Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega. My daughter and I read this a few years ago and absolutely loved it. It was so much fun. So this is a story following Lucely and her best friend Sid, and they cast a spell and accidentally cause a lot of problems, a lot of havoc throughout St. Augustine. So it's set in St. Augustine. Lucely's father does like a ghost tour at the cemetery, but also Lucely can see ghosts and the spirits of her ancestors, and they all like live in their house and like hang around and talk to her and help to raise her. So she communes with her spirits all the time. And so her father does this ghost tour, and it's maybe getting shut down, and she's trying to like save his job but also save the town from this nefarious thing that she's trying to figure out. So like it's got a lot of like Goonies elements to it. So like these kids on bikes trying to save their town and that kind of thing. And there's also some weird magic happening and a really funny cat. So I think you will enjoy this one a lot. We had a lot of fun with it. The audiobook is excellent. Next up, I want to recommend The Vanquishers by Kaylin Bayron. There's a whole series. I think the 3rd one is coming out right now, like sometime this month, maybe in early October. I'm not sure. I'll put that up here for you somewhere. But this is a series all about this group of kids who live in this town live in this world where vampires were once real. And this group called the Vanquishers were vampire hunters, and they got rid of all the vampires. And so now people aren't afraid of, like, a lot of the rules that people used to live by don't really apply anymore. Like, you can go out at night. You can do a lot of the things that before would have been impossible because vampires were a real threat. So at the beginning of this book, we're meeting these characters, and they're living in a time after the vampires had been taken out. Or have they? Our main characters, their parents were all somehow involved in the past, or they knew people who were vanquishers, so they still live by the old rules, which the kids find really annoying because, like, why are we the ones that have to suffer? Like, why can't we do things like everyone else? But there are reasons, and you will learn about that as the story goes on. And so this first book is like the setup. And then I think the rest of the books are going to be more about like what happens because of what happens at the end of this book. So I don't really know because I haven't read them, but I feel like the rest of the books are going to be a lot more action-packed. This one does have some action in it, but a lot of it is just setting up the world and learning about like what all of this means and who are all these people and how does it relate to them and that sort of thing. So really fun read. And then the last book I want to recommend is Opies Ghost by Justina Ireland. I read this a few years ago. In fact, I've written a lit bite for it. So if you want to do a whole like creepy fall unit, you can go check that out on my website. I will link it down below. This is a story set during the Great Migration period at the beginning of the 1900s. And we're following a character whose father was killed in a lynching. And her mother go north to go live with her aunt, I think. And so they are now living in this new place. But our main character, Opie, can see spirits, which is something she finds out very quickly when her father has been killed, and she sees him afterwards. And so she can see spirits and ghosts, and she wants to use her powers to help them. And her mother is now working in this house for this old woman, and the house seems to be haunted with all of these ghosts and spirits, and she's trying to figure out how to help them, but also her power to see spirits can be dangerous because if the wrong spirits find you, they can cause a lot of harm. So the story is all about Opie and figuring out who these ghosts are, why she can see them, how she's meant to help them. So It's a really good story, a lot of things to say about racism and discrimination and that sort of thing at this time in history. It's really well done. The writing is beautiful, and I think it's a really great way to incorporate some spookiness while also learning about some history. So those are all of my recommendations for fun fall reading. I hope you guys found something in this video to read and enjoy during this time of year. I'm so excited for all of the fall things, and I can't wait to dig into my own fall reading. So let me know down below in the comments, what kind of books do you crave reading in the fall? For me, it's always spooky, historical, and gothic. Those three things are like my favorite thing to read this time of year. So let me know down below, what is your favorite thing to read in the fall? I'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye!